could be fruity, fruit, dried fruit, nail varnish remover, hopefully not, unperfumed soaps. There's lots of different, you can take it out another step as well. The key thing is, if you're nosing any whiskies, whether it's my Tomintoul, my Glencadam, or even my blended whiskies, it's what I'm going to tell you what's in it. So the first one we're going to nose is the 10-year-old Tomintoul. I'm nosing it neat for a start. The reason I do add water to when doing a lot of these is because we do a lot of new spirit as well. And I know you don't have the new spirit available, but the new spirit is very high strength. It's about 68, 69% alcohol. If I was to nose new spirit all the time, or even the 40% whiskies, your nose becomes numb after a period of time. So we always try to dilute it for the nosing purposes. But for today, I'll just add a little bit of water. So if you'd like to nose your 10-year-old, before I tell you what we find in it, I'll open it up to the floor if anybody wants to unmute themselves and let me know. On the nose, not on the taste. I see, is Malcolm, is he from NASA? Is he up in the space station?
That's right. Tastes different up there. I always thought I loved this one because I always thought it was like opening up like a muesli box, like a fresh muesli box, and really nice and fresh cereals, etc. And then you suddenly get those sultanas and like raisins, sort of just at that bottom of it, And then so like really loved that, it's nice.
The way the Tomintoul, the production aspect of Tomintoul, the Tomintoul style is very light, fruity, and estery. Now that's a new spirit, and you can put it into all different types of casks. And I'll touch on the casks a bit later, but the 10-year-old, the new spirit that we make, as I say, is very light, fruity, and estery. And so hopefully you'll get that sort of sweet notes coming through on the nose. But once it's into cask, it totally transforms any whiskey. So what we are getting with the types of cask we're using, and the main types of casks we use, mainly bourbon casks, but you can get first fill bourbon. So basically that's bourbon can only be filled once in the US. So what you get is we get an endless supply of casks ex the US. We don't buy direct from the bourbon houses. We buy them through a cooperage. So you get a lot of first fill bourbon coming through. And it's not really rocket science, but we call it BB1, bourbon barrel first fill. So we put for our 10-year-old, put our new spirit into it, mature for 10 years. You get a lot of vanilla notes coming out of the barrel, the first fill barrel. Once that barrel is emptied, then we fill it again with new spirit. But this time, during the second maturation, they don't take out so much of the extractors from the wood because they've took it out. They've been taken out the first maturation. So the second filling of a bourbon, a BB2, when it's emptied, you don't get so much of the vanilla and the sweetness notes. So the key thing for us is that when we're doing all our different expressions, you'll see the 10, there's a 14, then we go up to the 16. It's not just an age thing. It's also the selection of the casks as well. How many first fill bourbons do you use? How many second fills? How many third fills? We might even use rechar casks in it. So all from Tomintoul, obviously. So it's not just an age, it depends on the type of cask we use. So when I'm nosing a whiskey, if I can pick up a lot of vanilla notes coming through, then I will assume there's a lot of first fill bourbon in the whiskey's been matured in. So in this one, what we're getting a lot of honey sweetness, which is part to do with the casks. I'm also getting some citrus notes as well. And the citrus notes for me is mainly to do with maybe second fill bourbon or the third fill bourbon. you'll notice I'm holding up a watch. If you can get your hands on these, it's even better for you when you're trying to impress your friends. Cover the glass. Keep it in a warm atmosphere for about 10 minutes, or hold it in your hand. And the vapor tries to escape. Because it's covered, it can't. So the only place it can go is up your nose. So any comments on the nose of the 10-year-old?
Some vanilla, sweet apples from Nick Brown. Tilly thinks it's like crunchy nut cornflakes.
Sweet apples, yep.
Which is a...
Get that cereal come through again.
What else? Coffee apple?
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting mainly to do with the apples. You can get the sweetness coming from the apples. Whether it's green apples, usually it's more of the sweeter apples. We're getting a hint of citrus in the background. That's not coming from the new spirit side. That's coming from the cask. So once you've nosed it, again, that's been neat. Have a taste, Slangevar. If you've attended many of these tastings, you'll hear all about long legs. They're not. I'm only 5'8", so I don't have any long legs. But the whiskey's got long legs, and you'll see it running down the. It's taking quite a while to run down the glass. Good quality. I'm now going to add a little bit of water to it, and again, swirl it around. Nose it. Now, when you add water to it, what you're doing is you're diluting it, but you're also changing the sort of the makeup of the whiskey as well. Now, I find that diluting it with water releases more of the flavors, more of the aromas, and if you nose it with adding water to it, you might pick up some more of the flavors that you didn't pick up the first time round. Not getting so much of the citrus in the nose with adding water, but I'm still getting that sweetness. Somebody mentioned toffee apples. There is maybe a bit of a toffee note coming through, whether it's the sweetness of the honey, the toffee. We call Tomintoul we call it the gentle dram. And that was coined by our chairman, Mr. Hellman. We're a family-owned company. We have been for the last 20 years. And Mr. Hellman, he hardly drinks at all. When he was with us, just after, he was sitting with a customer, and he tasted it was our 16-year-old. It was the first one we were producing. And he was very quiet, didn't say anything. And I said, "Is it okay?" And he says, "One of the smoothest drams I've ever had. It's a very gentle dram." And that's the only thing he wanted to add on to the label. So all the range has got the gentle dram on it. Okay, some are more robust than others. When you go to the peaty ones, I wouldn't say they were too gentle, but the main core of the Tomintoul is they're quite smooth, mellow, easy drinking. And I'm sure you'll find the Tomintoul 10-year-old goes down extremely well. Hopefully, it's not very fiery when you're drinking it. So whilst you're enjoying that, I will explain a little bit about Tomintoul. Tomintoul, and I'll prepare my next sample. Tomintoul was built in 1965, and it was two broking companies, two companies who bought and sold whiskies. They thought there was a a perceived need to lay down stocks of new spirit for their blends. So they decided that first thing they needed to do was find a water source for a distillery. They knew where they wanted it. They knew the style they wanted. And they started looking at 1964 for the site. They found a water supply, just as I'm sitting at the moment, it's about 300 meters to my right. And it's called the Ballantruan Spring. Not only was it a very good spring water supply, it had good volume as well. So they started to build a distillery on a greenfield site, and in July 1965, the first spirit ran from the stills. So a lot of history behind it. We don't go back to like our Glencadam distillery. We don't go back a couple of hundred years to 1825. We're relatively a modern, more up-to-date distillery, but we're still established in 1965. So in 1965, it was owned by the two broking companies. And from then up until 1973, it remained so until we get taken over by Whyte and MacKay in 1973. That remained the same until we, well, it was 1990 when I joined the company, still owned by Whyte and MacKay. But by that time, they'd been huge company. They owned Titleist golf equipment. They owned Prestige. They make kitchenware. But within their portfolio, they had Jim Beam. So we became part of their empire. And that remained until 2000. Mr. Hillman came along. Mr. Hillman owned a company called Angus Dundee Distillers. Well, Angus Dundee, they weren't distillers at that time. And they wanted to buy a distillery because they're a blending company predominantly. And the Tomintoul was always classed as a very good distillery for other companies' blends, supplying whiskey for other companies' blends. Now, what we do is we do a lot in the past, and also we still do a lot of, it's called reciprocal trading. I need other companies, other distilleries, spirits and whiskies for my blends, and they need my Tomintoul for their blends. So it's a very friendly set of circumstances where we swap whiskies and spirits just after distillation. So we can build up a portfolio of 30, 40 different whiskies for our blends. And because Mr. Hillman built the company and blended whiskies, that was why he wanted Tomintoul. However, within our warehouses, we've got single malt. You've always got single malts in your maturing. So he wanted to start producing the single malt because Whyte and MacKay didn't really promote Tomintoul as a single malt. So the first one we did was the 16, which we'll taste in a little bit later. Then we had the 10. Then we had one. It was a 27-year-old, which it's been off the market for quite a while. So we've gradually built up the Tomintoul single malt portfolio. So we're still probably maybe 8, 9, 10% single malt sales, and 90%, roughly 1% blended whiskies. Bespoke blends for customers. So we've an office out in China, we've one in India, we've one in Thailand. And if they have a customer who wants a bespoke blend, send them over. Not at the moment, because they're not coming over because of the virus, but we usually take them over, we create a blend for them, and hopefully they continue taking it for years to come. So the comments, I'm looking to see what comments have we got, and I'm looking down the side here. No heat. Much sweeter with water. Honey and lemon. Yeah, honey. The honey notes does come through. Crunchy nut cornflakes. An interesting one here. You can actually get the new spirit on the nose. Yeah, the new spirit we produce is quite light, fruity, and estery, and that does come through. It's a 10-year-old, so So it's not going to, and again, a lot of the casks, there'll be more BB2s and refill casks than BB1 in the 10-year-old. So you are getting more of the new spirit flavors coming through. So we'll crack on with the next one, which I have just poured, and it is our 14-year-old. Now, the 14-year-old is slightly different to, because a lot of our whiskies are a lot of our single malt whiskies, and I'm sure you've all got your own opinion. A lot of our whiskies are at 40% alcohol. And this was the first one we really took out at a higher strength of 46%. It's been out now for quite a while. In Scotland, in the UK, I wouldn't say it was our biggest seller because the 16-year-old is the flagship. But those who want higher strength whiskies, but more importantly, non-chill filtered. Again, a lot of people think if you chill filter your whiskies, most blend, in fact, nearly all blends are chill filtered. But if you chill filter your whiskies, you're taking out some of the flavor, the congener profile. And I've got to sit in the fence with this, but yeah, you probably do, because you're taking out some of the flavor, the congeners. So taking it through a chill filtration process, they chill it down and they put it through some bag filter. Whereas with if it's unchill filtered, or we would say not chill filtered, then basically it's come out of the cask, it's been filtered but not chill filtered, and reduced with D-min water, and then bottled at 46%. So again, same procedure that I had with the 10-year-old. This is slightly stronger, and it's 6% stronger, unchill filtered. Now on the nose this time, I'm getting it a little bit sharper than the 10-year-old. Getting more of you've still got that sweetness there, but I really have to add water to this one because I've added quite a splash of water. How much water you add? Some people add just a little drop. Some people add maybe 25% as much as in the glass. I've added some water to it. I find it's quite, it's got more mouthfeel than the 10-year-old, but I've got more of the floral notes coming through. Now I do know that on the 14-year-old, again, there's a different ratio of first fill bourbon, second fill, third fill, and also rechar. So again, it's not just an age thing, as I said earlier, it's a selection of the casks. Adding a bit of water, still quite mild to taste. A little bit creamier than the 10-year-old. Again, all down to cask selection as well. And it's a little bit drier than the 10-year-old. So it's a bit more dryness on the tongue.
I find this one here, Robert, I always find it's got a lot of tropical fruits. For some reason, it's just really it's this fruit salady, tropical fruit salad. But we do have some people saying they've got a lot of milk chocolate from it, chocolate orange, cherry ripe. Again, fruits.
Yeah, the sweetness, again, as I said earlier, when you're going down, it's all individual preference, but when you're going down, you'll see that on the sweetness side, some people might pick up honey or vanilla or caramel, but then you can take it to the next stage where I'm looking here, you've got toast, treacle, custard, and chocolate. Now the chocolate is stemming on the outer part of the wheel from the vanilla, and the vanilla is associated with the cask. So yeah, those that are picking up the chocolate, some people may not pick up the chocolate, that's fine. If you pick up the vanilla, then your nose could be picking up the same sort of profile as the chocolate. So what I find with the 14 as well, again, if you've tasted it with or without water, preference with water for me, I still find it quite dry in the mouth, a little bit peppery. And again, all to do with the cask selection. So again, enjoy your 14, and we'll skip on to the next one. Excuse me 1 second.
Can I just ask Robert, what was the decision to go 46% for that one? What was the...
Hope you can hear that. Can you hear this?
Great sound.
Fantastic noise that. What we'd done when we bought Tomintoul in 2000, when Mr. Hillman bought Tomintoul, I say we were on the last day of July. We were owned by Whyte and MacKay, who owned Dalmore, Fetter Cairn, Isle of Jura, Invergordon Grain Distillery in Domindell. And so that was on the last day of July 2000. And the first day of August 2000, we were a standalone distillery with Angus Dundee. All my team went with us.
Sorry, folks, we'll just get him back again. There has been a bit of stalling and all that when he's been talking. So obviously the connection over there, he is in the middle of the mountains where the distillery sits. So I'm quite sure that Malcolm Turnbull's had something to do with an internet connection out there. So we'll hopefully get him back pretty soon.
You'll pop him at the bottom of that list as well.
Fine. Just enjoy that at the moment. I really enjoy the 14. Was that I'm not sure why. I think the nose on it seems to be a little bit more spirity, and yeah, I just that nice chocolatiness to it, and the tropical fruits are really nice with the Tomintoul 14.
I think that those that have been commenting have been pretty much on the same page with you there. But you know, when we're talking about chocolatey and chocolate orange and cherry ripe, and then someone said yes, and also elements of honey, possibly a bit bitter on the finish. But I think from those contributing in there, everyone seems to be really enjoying that fruity, chocolatey, sweet sort of characteristic.
Yeah, definitely.
That's certainly
good.
Fair.
Yeah, it was good. So everybody knows as well tonight, all the Tomintouls have 15% off. So if you're interested in any of these bottles, they are 15% off. And hopefully when we get Robert back, we'll get to the point where we launch his 30-year-old the whiskey that we've not had available until today. So we did also get some new make spirit in. We were supposed to send this out, however, it arrived this morning, as it does with DHL. And so hopefully the next tasting we have on at the end of April, we will send some of this out to you so you can at least taste some of this. I think it's bottled in this bottle here at 68.3%, which is probably one of the reasons why DHL weren't too happy about it coming into the country. But we'll get that out to anybody going on the next tasting. Whilst you're on, the next tasting as well will be 29th of April, and it will be Tomintoul Distillery from New Zealand and Corowa Distillery from Australia. So we're doing a bit of an Anzac theme. We're going across the waters, 3 whiskies from Thompson and 3 whiskies from Corowa Distillery. And a couple of the Corowas and a couple of the Thompsons will be new releases. So hopefully,
that should be great.
Yeah, it'll be a good session to have. Let me see if I can get in touch with Robert here. Feel free to have a toilet break if you want, folks, or get yourself some water. We'll try and get Robert back again.
He's in there. We're going one. No, go down, go down, go down.
Just need time, yeah.
No, 2 up.
Hi, Craig, can you hear me?
I can.
There he is.
Can you see me?
I can. Is that a new camera?
Yeah, what it is, for some reason, it came up with it said that Zoom was going to disconnect. For some reason. So I've dialed in through my phone, so it's slightly different.
Sounds
So
better.
Bear with me while I set this up.
Sounds much better. Seems to be a bit more in control now.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm just using it off my phone, so I don't have all the facilities for reading the people's comments, but I'm sure you can read that out for me.
Sure, it's fine. Yeah. Well, we're just talking there just about what was it? Like I said, I think this. I really do prefer the 14. I think it's got a lot of fruity characters to it. Yeah, it's just got more flavour to it. I think just having those oils in there just give it a little bit more, and I do enjoy that in a whiskey. And I think it just defines that whole bourbon barrel maturation a little more, the 14, which is my favourite sort of maturation point in a whiskey. So.
Well, you asked about why we took it out. I was covering the fact that in late 2002, Mr. Hillman wanted to buy another distillery. So he asked about Glencadam. Now, we always exchanged spirit with Glencadam because new spirit was really good. But the distillery itself wasn't very big. And about 20 years ago, a lot of companies were wanting to expand their existing distilleries. So the smaller distilleries that needed a lot of money spent on them, they wouldn't. They sold them off or mothballed them. And Allied Domecq, who owned Glencadam at the time, decided that they were going to mothball. They'd mothballed Glencadam in 2000, and they'd offered it to Mr. Hillman in late 2002. So by 2003, we had it up and running again. And when I went to see it, it was a bit of a dilemma for me because we're predominantly a blending company. It was the production cost is much higher, and the economies of scale are not there because it's a smaller production unit. However, it had potential for a single malt. And one of the key things we did with Glencadam initially was that we were taking out everything at 46%, unchill filtered, and no added colouring. And it was in the back of that Mr. Hillman wanted to do the same with Tomintoul 14. So it was probably in the back of the success of the Glencadam, unchill filtered and higher strength, that we took out the 14. So, but all the others, most of the others in the Tomintoul range are at 40%, or unless you're going for the special bottlings or the very, very old ones. So that was the reason that we went with the higher strength. As I say, I can't see the comments, but some people similar to yourself may prefer the 14, because you're right, it's still got that. We haven't chill filtered out any of the flavor compounds.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Somebody
said,
I
think the 14's objectively a better whiskey, but it's more like a Me Too. The 10-year-old's quite distinctive, so it's so the 14 just has more to it, has more structure to it, I think. Whereas the 10 is just a sort of, for me, a nice drinker. Like it's just beautiful. It's very, like you said, it's very gentle. So it's one that you just sort of go along with and go, that's nice, and it's beautiful on the palate, and it's got a lovely nose to it. And the 14's a bit more, I could perhaps sit after dinner and, I really enjoy that one, sort of thing. And, it's, I do enjoy it.
And Chris has said that he thinks that the higher proof actually helps the 14 in that respect.
Mm-hmm. We're finding, again, I communicate a lot with the local, we've got a lot of local specialist whiskey shops up here. And we'd actually deliver direct from Domindell to them rather than from our main warehouse. And when we're delivering, we always like the feedback, and the feedback of the people, the footfall coming through the shops. A lot of them are wanting to go for higher strength whiskies. And again, it's something that we have looked at it, and we have been quite successful with the Glencadam range. But the majority of our whiskies are still at 40%.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. But
and
in regards
also
to the large bottle, the large bottle that you did, can you tell everybody about that? And where is it now? Like,
well, what happened was we were asked by the local two local entrepreneurs who had shops and a restaurant in the village. They want to attract people up there during out of season, and they asked if we would supply whiskey for a big bottle, and the chairman's son, he decided, yes, no problem. I don't think he realized what they were putting into it or how big the bottle was going to be. So it was 105.3 litres of alcohol that went into it, and it was 14-year-old. So what we had to do, if you ever get the chance, I think the video would still be online somewhere. We actually had to buy back our own bottles from the duty paid store. So it was crazy. We had to buy back our own bottles. We then had to get a local, which we call a gauger, he's an old exciseman, who had to supervise that they were genuine, they had the duty stamp on them and everything. I don't know what you guys get in Australia, but I don't know if you've seen it in our bottles. We have a UK duty stamp on the side of the bottle, so we paid duty in the UK. Around about £30.
Don't have anything like that. They're changing the labelling here next year, where there'll be a few different changes to the back label on bottles and a few different things on there. But we've got nothing like that. No extra stamps we need to put on there. But yeah.
Oh, well, we have to rework the stamps for the UK market, and so we had to buy back all the 14-year-old, 150 bottles, and we had the exciseman, the gauger. We had a barrister, and we had another solicitor who was employed by one of the entrepreneurs, and it was very basic. We put the big bottle onto our weighing machine in the filling store, and we stood up on a platform and just poured the bottles in through a funnel. It was what we would call Heath Robinson, but it worked. The bottle itself is about 7 or 8 millimeters thick, and it was transported up to the village. then went on a little holiday to Edinburgh to the Scotch whisky experience for a year. Then came back to the village. One of the entrepreneurs, he left the business, and we were approached and we bought it back. But however, we bought it back last year, but we haven't been able to move it because we're not allowed into the restaurant to pick it up. So it's still sitting there. No, it's not even. It's still sitting in it's not an empty restaurant. It's a closed restaurant, and it's we can't wait till we get it back down here.
Yeah.
What we're going to do with it, God knows. But it was funny because it was advertised in the Guinness Book of Records as the largest bottle of Scotch whisky in the world, or the largest bottle of whisky in the world. And then somebody from I can't remember, was it Jim Beam or somebody had a bigger bottle of bourbon. And then Grouse, the famous Grouse, produced the biggest bottle of blended whiskies. So we were still the biggest bottle of malt whiskey, single malt whiskey. And if MD beats us, then they'll have to, we can always say we've got the biggest bottle of the oldest single malt whiskey, 14-year-old. So I'm just waiting for some of the big boys to come out with a 200-litre bottle of 21-year-old or something just to beat us. But no, we've still got the largest bottle of single malt Scotch whisky in the world.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Google the guys took a video. It's a wee bit out of date now, but you'll see what the procedure was for bottling it.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, definitely. I might even we've got a YouTube channel now, so I might even put this and also that on the YouTube channel just to let everybody see it.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube has been great for us because I've done various YouTube. There's a German guy did one quite recently. Well, it was done last year, 2019, but it's still on YouTube. He did a really good job of promoting our Tomintoul in Germany. And we've also just done one with Charlie McLean, which I don't think it's on YouTube yet. I don't think Fergus has released it for that. But anyway, the next whiskey we'll continue is my favorite, Domindell 16-year-old. This was the first one that we created for Mr. Hillman just after he took over the company. He wanted an older whiskey because he was trying to promote the single malt to the American market. So he wanted something older, and we had 16-year-old. We'd been doing some not experiments. We've been doing some tastings of 16-year-old for a blend. But to me, the 16-year-old was too good just to put into a blend. Anyway, Mr. Hillman came up, and we decided we'd go for the older whiskies. And that's why he coined the phrase "the gentle dram." Then, when we were trying to do, and this is why tasting notes are very subjective to me. We had a sales guy in the company. He was sent up. We had to do what they call a copy for the label and tasting notes. And there were only two of us. We couldn't agree. And we had most of the afternoon trying to take all the cask samples and agree tasting notes. And his was totally different to mine. So Mr. Hillman said, forget the tasting notes. Let's put the history of Tomintoul and my production background on it as well. So basically, that was the first one we ever created under the Angus Dundee banner. And it's still my favorite because on the nose, you've got, again, the gentleness, the mildness, the soft fruits. But again, going back to the cask, you'll get quite a big hit of vanilla coming through. A lot of first fill bourbon, and it's been in for a lot of years, 16 years. So you'll get that custard, you'll get that toffiness, you'll get the vanilla, you'll get a lot of sweetness coming through as well. Now, and this is probably the only one that I do drink without water. as I said, it's my go-to whiskey for Tomintoul, and usually just neat. So on the nose, as I say, soft fruits. One of my colleagues, he picks up a little bit of nuttiness coming through, but I don't pick up too much of the nuttiness, not in the nose. Mild, mellow, very easy drinking. I'm going home at lunchtime today. Now, what we find with the 16, no, it's not. If the 14 gave you that pepperiness on the tongue, you don't get so much of that. You get a little bit of smoothness at the beginning, quite longer lasting, and you get that pepperiness coming through at the end. I do. I'm sure there'll be lots of different comments from the team that you've assembled together. But yeah, my favorite one. Whilst you're enjoying your 16, I'll cover a little bit about the production at Tomintoul. We're a medium-sized distillery. We produce 3.4 million litres of pure alcohol every year. And as I said, the majority of that is either reciprocated or goes into blends. We have warehouse capacity for 120,000 casks on just Tomintoul on its own. And at our bottling site, we have another capacity for about 130,000, 140,000. And at Glencadam Distillery, maybe about just under 24,000 casks. So we've got a lot of storage capacity for our whiskies. At Domindell at the moment, I've got 116,000, so I'm a wee bit below my maximum. And all ages, right from 1966 right through to obviously what was filled this morning. So large warehousing capacity, medium-sized production capacity. Production, the malted barley we're using is locally grown malted barley from Scotland. And there's a few maltsters within 50, 60 miles of here. So we take in the malted barley from them. And the varieties we're using is much the same as the varieties that many distillers use. So we can't say that there's varietal differences is going to make that difference to our Tomintoul, because other distilleries are using the same varieties of malted barley. We grind it, obviously, to expose the starch, and then we add the ground malt to the mash tun, where we mix it with hot water. And the temperature of the hot water is critical because we need to convert the starch to sugars. And the mash tun that we have is what we call a semi-lauter mash tun, and it's probably not as efficient as the brewery mash tuns, but it's more efficient than the old style mash tuns that you'll see from the 1900s to 1950s. And then it goes into the fermenters, the washbacks. And when a lot of the brand ambassadors are talking about, or the marketing people are talking about flavor aspects and the congener profile, they tend to miss out fermentation. Fermentation is where a lot of the flavor emanates from. Okay, you get the cereal notes from the malted barley, obviously, but you get a lot of the congener profile coming from the fermentation. And then fermenting here at Tomintoul is between 54 and 64 hours. And by that time, we're left with a product which is it's a bit of a crude beer. It's called wash, and it's about 8% alcohol. And all of that 8% alcohol after fermentation goes into 2 copper pot stills. Now, the pot stills, you'll see they're just the shape, size and shape of the ones behind Craig. They're quite large copper pot stills with a boil ball. That's that sort of ball bit in the middle. And the key for making a very light spirit is contact with copper. So we have very tall stills. So as you're boiling in the first distillation, as you're boiling, all we're trying to do is boil all the alcohol from the first distillation. And as you're boiling, the lighter elements come over the top. Heavier elements come through later on. Now, the more contact with copper, the taller the stills, as a rule of thumb, the lighter the spirit. And that's why, go back to 1965, the owners, the people who started Tomintoul, they wanted a very light spirit. And that's why, they wanted to build it in the Glenlivet area, and also they wanted the tall stills. If you see different distilleries, you'll see different shapes, sizes of stills. You'll see very tall, very short, very fat. The lie pipe, which is a bit between the top of the still and the condenser, can have a sloping lie pipe. It can go up the way, it can go sideways. All of that adds to the quality or the characteristic of the new spirit. And that's why we've all got different. So the malted barley is the same. Mashing techniques are usually the same. Fermentations can change depending on not so much the yeast addition, but on the time it's fermented. Some people ferment for over 120 hours. You get a lot of the sour notes coming through, which carries forward into the new spirit. If you look at some of the short stills, Macallan have got very small stills, very tight lie pipe coming down. So they produce a heavier new spirit. So it's, again, new spirit is house styles. But importantly for us, and this is not clear spirit, but this is giving an idea, when it comes off the still, it's crystal clear. And that's only half the equation. The other half is putting it into the cask. You really need to have a good and robust cask policy for maturation. If I was to fill exhausted casks today, then my new spirit is not going to have the maturation effect that we want after 10 years, 16 years, 21 years. You really need to be on the ball with the cask selection. And we spend a fortune, an absolute fortune, on taking in casks from the US. But also more recently, over the last 15 years, I've been going out to Spain to take in sherry casks. We've got port casks. We have now taken in wine casks. And all of these casks are very expensive. So, but it's a cask selection. The new spirit I'm making, apart from 6 weeks every year, the new spirit I'm making for 41 weeks of the year is light, fruity, estery new spirit. It's the same, doesn't matter if it's in January or in August, September, the quality of that spirit is the same. So that's a 16-year-old that you've tasted. I can't see the comments, so I'll rely on somebody to feedback to on the comparisons between the 16, 14 and the 10.
John was just telling us there he did a tour with Tom at the Tomintoul Distillery. Thought it was a great experience. So Tom's not with you anymore, is he?
No, Tom retired.
Yeah.
Tom is a bit of a character. I always said when Tom was doing a tour, believe half of it, because he came up with some hell of a stories. But no, he was really good. Tom, I'd known Tom from my school days. Tom had very bright guy. He had a degree in chemistry, and but he'd started his production at a distillery called the Braes of Glenlivet, now called Breval, with Shivers Brothers, and then he left them to go to J&B, and then he left J&B to join Macallan, and Macallan did a bit Macallan weren't as sort of famous as they would be nowadays, and Macallan went through a restructuring program, and he made redundant, or he took redundancy. Then he joined us. It was fantastic for us, but like everybody else, retirement looms, and he took retirement. So I've got another guy now called Graham, and we like to employ people that have got production experience. Nothing against graduates, please. If you're a graduate, it's not that we don't employ graduates, but we do. But for the type of job that Tom was doing and Graham, we like people with a lot of experience. And Graham had experience with Shivers Brothers, experience with up at Balblair, and then he went to Arnhem. Then he came to us. So we're like people with a bit of experience. And the production supervisor, he was ex-Shivers. Then he went to Allied Domec. So we're like people that that hands-on people that know how to run a distillery.
Yeah, good.
So yeah, Tom, and I noticed a comment at the bottom about the boardroom. This is where I'm sitting at the moment. I'm sitting in the boardroom at the moment. I think that's maybe why we get cut off, because all the doors will be shut. So that obviously we're a working distillery. All the doors are shut. I think the Wi-Fi couldn't penetrate the walls. So
it's quite interesting. Every time you visit there, most distilleries, they take you round the distillery first, and then you get to the tasting room, etc. Then you have a taste. Not at Tomintoul. They take you to the boardroom first, feed you a whiskey, and then take you on the tour.
And come back and feed you with more whiskey.
That's right.
That's well, we had this, and again, going back to Tom, we always said it was Tom's tours. To be honest, we had to cut them back a bit because Tom's tours, again, he was really good because he should, in a different life, he should have been a brand ambassador traveling the world, because his tours would sometimes take 3, maybe 4 hours. And we always said, after a tour, most distilleries will give you a couple of drams to finish off with. Tom he'd all the bottles out. It was 4, 5, 6 drams, and it got to the stage. It was a session. It was. So yeah, we can't complain because we don't have a visitor centre. We try to be different to most other places, just to give people a different experience. And again, I'm not knocking the big boys because they do a wonderful job with the attracting tourists. But if you, and I'm sure everybody that's listening into this, whiskey aficionados, they want a bit more information. And sometimes the big boys won't give out that information, or the guides that take you around don't know that information. Whereas with Tom and Graham and myself and Andrew, and Douglas at Glencadam, when you get shown around, okay, there's certain things that company confidentiality we wouldn't divulge, but you ask questions about production, fermentation, whatever, yeah, we can answer all of those. And that's what attracts people to distillers like ours. So that was a 16-year-old. Now we're going to have something slightly different. We're going on to the, if I can find it here, bear with me.
There's no little bottle, it's just from the big bottle.
We're going on to the Siree. Now, bear with me till I open this.
That was like expected. That was off camera.
Pouring it from the bottom. I just want to share with everybody, and I'm not sure how important these comments are to you, Robert, but Jim Murray back in 2012 with a 16-year-old scored at a 94.5, but he said, fruity concoction of apples and pears topped with vanilla ice cream, one of the noses of the year. So, what do those comments mean? Do these guys mean much to you, or do you just keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, again, it actually depends where you are. Yeah, you get the likes of Jim Murray fell out of favour this year with his some of his comments in the Whisky 2021 Bible. But yeah, these comments and from him, from Charlie McLean, Dave Broom, they do mean a lot to us because they're doing this for a living and they're comparing with other companies, other whiskies, other brands. I've been out to the Far East quite a few times. Never been to Australia. But I've been out to an office in China and Thailand, and I go out there. I used to go out there a couple of times a year, and you would sit at a whiskey tasting, and it was very religiously set up. You know, you had tasting glasses and notepads and everything else. And if you went into Malaysia, the one I did at a very posh hotel in Malaysia, and there was about 30 people, and I could see them all looking at Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible to get comparisons. And I did a PowerPoint presentation. And again, I'm not knocking other companies' whiskies, but at that time it wasn't the Syrah I was doing. It was just the Tomintoul, the first sherry, the finish that we had. And he gave it something like 94 or 94.5 from one of his first books. And I was comparing that with Macallan, Glenmorangie, Glenfiddich, and everything else. And I said, look, we're not as famous as these guys, but this is quite a, it's a bit like Parker's with the wine. This is quite a famous author. He knows his whiskies, and he puts us up there with the big boys. And I think it sort of, the way we tried to push that forward is that, you know, we can compete with anybody with our whiskies, but try and compete with Macallan. Macallan's marketing budget could probably buy our distillery for the year. You know, it's a totally different concept altogether. We know we've got good whiskies. We know we can compete with the best, but you really need to promote it out there. And that's something that now we are doing. Going back 10, 15 years, we weren't heavily promoting the single malts. We were just promoting or weren't even promoting the blends. We had customers for blends that we, in those days, 95, 96% was blended whiskies. Now it's changing because we've got all these different expressions. I went out to Spain in 2004, and that was the first sherry cask we took in. I wanted to take in PX, but I wasn't allowed to take in PX at that time. Now we've got the PX casks coming in. We've got the Oloroso sherry. We have port casks, Tawny port, Ruby port, lots of different casks coming in. So the one that we've got at the moment, and this is a we call this one limited edition. Okay, it's 6,000. We've got different batches. Batch 1 is the one I've got here, and it's 6,000 bottles for batch 1. We do produce different batches. Now, this is batch 1 that I have here. Oloroso sherry, when you go out to Spain, there's all different types of sherry. There's Fino, Amontillado, Manzanilla, PX. We in Oloroso, we chose the Oloroso casks. Initially, it was old Oloroso casks. Now we're getting them seasoned with Oloroso for 2.5 years before we take them into Scotland. So we take the Oloroso casks, and it's a finish. So we'll take an aged Tomintoul and we'll fill it into the sherry cask for a number of years. Now, we don't just leave it in the cask for 3 months, 6 months. We try to leave it in the cask for a minimum of 2 years if we can, and sometimes longer. The longer you leave it, that might be a different finish we take out. But this one, the Syrah, is one of our most recent ones. And again, feedback we were getting locally was fantastic. Entry for a sherry cask, so they're not having to pay, you know, 70, 80 pound UK pounds for a bottle. So it was more of an entry level. With the local whiskey shops, it's going down really well. And the only feedback we were getting from the local shops was, why can't we make it higher strength? They wanted a sherry at higher strength. I'm a distiller. I'll leave it to the marketing guys. I'll leave it to Aaron and Tanya and Brian and Fergus to do all that, because I can only feedback. The feedback that your guys listening today, that they give, obviously we listen to we look at the comments that we get on the social media, and they are passed on to the owners of the company to say, look, maybe we need to change tack here. So on the Oloroso cask, now we've got this time. Imagine it's an Oloroso cask, so you're going to get some of the fruits coming through. Now, the fruits you're going to get, you're not going to get the raisiny type you would get with the PX, but you're going to get strong red fruits, but also you're going to get a little bit of dried fruit as well. Raisins, sultanas, but not overpowering on that. But again, the key thing that comes out for me is I know the casks we've selected to go into the sherry casks, and we select a lot of first fill bourbon. And you're going to get this. I'd like to experiment more, but if you've got vanilla notes going into a sherry cask, you're going to get more toffiness coming through, butterscotch, tablet, that type of nose. Yeah, it's I haven't added water to this one either. Quite mellow. Little bit of dryness, not so much. You get a bit of sweetness as well. But what somebody mentioned earlier about the chocolate, now I'm getting chocolate coming through on the taste.
We've got a cracking chocolate shop over here in Australia, might be elsewhere, called Cocoa Black. And Nick Brown said candied orange slices dipped in chocolate, you get it Cocoa Black. So, I mean, that's a huge compliment, because Cocoa Black here is a stunning chocolate shop. So you've done the chocolate thing very well.
Oh, well, yeah, you're getting that chocolate. And I don't know if you guys, I mean, I don't do a lot of the tastings when I'm doing pairings with anything. Yeah. But Ian Forteith, he's done pairings with whiskey and cigars, whiskey and cheese, whiskey and chocolate. And we do find that okay, you can go to the other extreme. You can do peated whiskies with very dark chocolate, but we do find that a lot of the comments we're getting on the sherry finishes, whether it's Tomintoul or Glencadam, is we're getting this chocolatey note. Funny thing is, the chocolate on the nose, the chocolate doesn't seem to come through. You don't get. I mean, to be honest, I've never actually opened a bar of chocolate and started to sniff it and see what I'm going to get. It's always on the taste that I'm going to get it. And so we don't get any chocolatey notes on the nose, but we do get the chocolatey notes on the taste. The sherry finishes are something that sherry casks have been used for decades, but I remember using them. My background is that I started at Glenlivet in 1974. My dad, my grandfather, great-grandfather all worked at the Glenlivet. And when I started there in 1974, we were taking in sherry casks from Spain at that time, filling it with new spirit and leaving it in warehouse for 10, 12, 15 years. But they were mixing their sherry casks with their non-sherry casks for their single malt. Because in those days, Glenlivet only had one single malt. Glenfiddich only had one single malt. Everybody had one. I mean, the plethora of single malt expressions you're getting now is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, to be honest, I can't remember how many we've got on the list. Then you look at Bruichladdich, you look at Glenmorangie, you look at even Glenlivet. The amount of different expressions they've got is phenomenal. Benriach was another one. Definitely. And when my dad was, when I was growing up, and my dad was at Glenlivet, if somebody gave him a bottle of a dram of, say, Glenfiddich, as opposed to a dram of Glenlivet, he could pick it out. Nowadays, people like me and the other distillers, very difficult. Somebody puts a dram in front of me, a Tomintoul Distillery, and they say, what is it? It could be a Tomintoul Distillery, it could be maybe a Glenallachie sherry finish. The differences are not not as profound as they were in the 1960s.
Yeah, I think
However,
now putting on 10 to 20 bottles a day on our retail site now, new bottles. So it's a hard job now. It's not just like for us, even 5 years was, you'd put on maybe 20 bottles at the start of the week and then perhaps, another 10 by the end of the month. So 30 for the month. It's now 10 a day. It's like so many new bottlings all the time, changing the labels, changing the bottle design, changing ABV, changing. It's just like, it's exhausting.
And even I have difficulty sometimes keeping up. I wait for the marketing guys to send me out what they've just bottled. We're doing a lot of single cask bottlings at the moment, and it's impossible for us to take everyone in to sell here. But at the moment, we're not selling much from a distillery because of the lockdown, but we are selling some to the specialist shops who are doing mail order, and that's going down quite well. But even I'm getting confused as to what all the new expressions that are coming out. It was nice and simple in the 1980s. It was very simple. But the Oloroso, again, I don't know the feedback from apart from the chocolate notes, but yeah, the Oloroso finishes for us are quite popular.
Yeah, I think everybody's just sitting back enjoying this one because there's not too much in the chat. It's maybe one.
We select our casks from 2 bodegas in Spain. I've been out there since I said 2004. We hooked up with a family bodega in 2004, and we still use them, but very small bodega. And we've got another bodega now that we've used, and also for the specialist one-off finishes that we're doing, the single cask releases, which are still maturing. We are using a third bodega, but the 2 bodegas that we're using, very different guys. One is mainly old Oloroso casks, and the other guy, he does he's a cooperage. He makes the casks, and then he seasons, and that's the sherry industry is not as big as the whiskey industry. Trying to get old Oloroso casks, getting ones from the bottom of the Solera is basically non-existent. And it doesn't matter if you're William Grant's, if you're Macallan, if you're Diageo, if you're us, or some of the even smaller companies. We are now going down the route of getting new casks made, leaving them in Jerez to be seasoned for us. It's a minimum of 2.5 years. Some are 1.5, some are 2, some could be 3, but we prefer the 2.5 years. And then we ship them in here, and we fill them. And what we fill them with, some with new spirit, some maybe with a 5-year-old, some with 10-year-old. It all depends on how long we want the finishing to be. And with everything else, with the Syrah as well, you take different casks to make up the bottle.
Yeah, are you still doing the 12-year-old sherry finish? Is that still going to continue?
That should still continue. It's still in the market, yeah. We did change the Glencadam one. Glencadam used to be a 14, then it jumped up to a 19, and that was just because of the stock in the warehouse. Yeah. Very difficult to plan ahead. What I'd like to if you guys could tell me what you're going to sell in 15 years' time, tell me, because it's very difficult for us to lay down stock in the hope that somebody will buy it in years to come. Yeah. So for the 14-year-old Glencadam, again, we didn't have the marketing team that we have now, but we laid down the Glencadam and we bottle it as a 14-year-old. However, we'd laid down far more than we were bottling. So the next bottling would have been slightly older, but we still put it out as a 14-year-old because it was maybe a 15-year-old, but we didn't want to change. But then after a period of time, you're having 17, 18, 19-year-old whiskies. Why would you want to keep that as a 14-year-old?
Yeah.
So So, and again, we're not alone in that. That's why, going back to your shelf space, that's why we take out all these different expressions, and it's very difficult to keep up. And then the other thing that we had, we haven't experienced with Tomintoul, with Glencadam, with no stock for 3 years because they didn't produce in 2000 to 2003. Tomintoul never had that problem. But so yeah, it all depends on the stock availability and what we've laid down in the warehouse.
Yeah,
I've got casks in the warehouse that I'm sampling at the moment. They've been in sherry casks for about 6 years. Absolute nectar, you know. And how long we'll leave them for, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and they were they started off. I think they started off as a 5 or 6 year old that we decanted into sherry casks, and obviously they've been double the life in the sherry casks. Absolute nectar.
Yep. Well, yeah.
And it'd be criminal to use those in blends. We try not to use the well.
We will buy the casks. You just tell us how much though.
Sounds good, Max. Sounds good.
The other thing with most of our whiskies, except the syrah and the sherry and the port, they're all kosher whiskies, and we sell a lot in the US, kosher whiskies in the US. So we're not allowed to add sherry to the 10 or the 14 or the 16 or the 21.
Right. Yep.
But the syrah obviously has got it's obviously got sherry casks in it. So that's the syrah.
How do you get around that then for kosher?
It's just not promoted as kosher.
Right. It's not.
But the funny thing is, about 5 or 6 years ago, I did one of these whiskey lives in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
And went out to Israel to Whiskey Live Tel Aviv, and on the stand with the Tomintoul sherry, and I thought, well, why are they wanting? Because it's not kosher. Anyway, there's a lot of people in Israel that are non-kosher. So I said to one of the guys coming, this is not kosher certified. He says, why? And I said, because it contains sherry. He went, so what? We drink Macallan. And I said, I don't know if you can see it on these ones here. On these ones here, we've got a symbol. It's got an OU and Orthodox Union. And he says, he says, now I understand. He says, that's an American thing. Because there's lots of different kosher certifications. But the one that we've signed, the one that we got audited on is obviously the OU one. And it just means that we're not allowed to add any sherry casks to them. And for me, it's quite easy because the sherry cask is normally butts, 500 litres. So when we're doing a 16-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, or a 21-year-old, we don't select any butts for that bottle. And that's why you get a lot more vanilla notes coming through, sweetness coming through on those ones than you do on the because they don't contain any sherry cask. So any comments about the chocolatiness coming through or the ripe berries coming through on the 10 or the 16 is probably, it was certainly nothing to do with the sherry because there's no sherry in it. So the next one we're going on to, I don't know how long you've signed up to Zoom for, but we'll go on to the 21 now. 21, bear with me. What's been the preference from your people listening in of the 4 we've done so far?
I think we'd have to ask because there's 14. If we get everybody to comment, it'd be great. 14. Yeah. Most are 14 so far.
Again, that could be due to the high spec. I mean, that's the feedback that I'll give to the team, the marketing team, and the owners of the company.
Yeah, we've got 16.
The owners of the company, Mr. Hellman's our chairman, and his son and daughter, they're the owners of the company. So Aaron Hellman, he looks after the sales and the marketing side, and Tanya, his sister, looks after the stocks and the finance. We also have we've got a very small team of directors, core company directors. We've got Stephen, he's the director at the bottling plant. He looks after all bottling. Brian Megson, who I think you've communicated with before and met.
Well, yourself and Brian took me to the Downs Hotel one night, and we had dinner there, and they've got a big kind of glass wall of whiskey in there. So it was good. Yeah.
Well, Brian's our co-director. He looks after he looks after the China, India, and Thailand offices. A close confidant of Mr. Hellman, our chairman. Myself, I'm a director looking after the production. I don't do bottling because Stephen does the bottling plant. I look after the production. So it's quite a small core Angus Dundee directors team. And but the two owners of the company, they're very much hands-on. I'm surprised that they haven't been phoning me about 3-4 times since I started this conversation. Very much hands-on. All decisions go through them. All sort of significant decisions go through them. So you would never take out a bottling or design a label without getting approval from them. And then we've got newly appointed marketing team in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's run by a guy called Fergus Hartley. He's our chief commercial officer, and again, it's his drive and enthusiasm that's taking the single malts hopefully to another level. So it's working very well for us. So now we have the 5th one on the list, 21-year-old. Well, I'll throw it out to your team. Can anyone tell us what they were doing 21 years ago?
Ooh, right. Welcome to put a few comments on, and we'll read them out. I
was turning 18.
I had been in Australia for 4 years, so I just finished my chefing apprenticeship 21 years ago. I would have been a chef, becoming a chef about this time.
Nick was thrown in. He was worrying about the Y2K bug.
as we all were. We've got a different virus to worry about now.
Tamara says I was happy and single.
Thursday night uni night at the pub. Yeah, that were the days.
Amazing,
so
isn't it?
if we can, I don't know the age profile, but if we can pick on Tamara, she was single. I presume she's married now. So everything that Tamara has done since she was happy and single. So and I've never met Tamara. I can't even see her on the screen, but so it could be university, it could be marriage, it could be divorce, it could be children, it could be therapy, it could be anything that's happened in that period. For all of those 21 years since Tamara was happy and single, this has been lying in my warehouse at Tomintoul in a cask. So when Tamara or any of your listeners are sipping not just a 21-year-old, any really old whiskey, just think back to what you were doing when this was made, put into cask. I see Malcolm. Oh, Malcolm, I recognize Malcolm. He's the guy with his spacesuit at the background. So yeah, it's been 21 years in cask, waiting to get to your lips. Savor it. Slàinte. Now, on the nose, what I'm getting, and I've done this, you can see, I'll take a bottle to the fore. The bottle is near empty. We've had a lot of tastings of Tomintoul 21. So what we're getting, it's been in the cask for 21 years. You are going to get that dryness from the oak coming through. And also, Not so much of the vanilla notes as you would expect, because I know about the ratio of the first fill bourbons to the second fill. 21 years ago, that's when Angus Dundee took over Tomintoul. And at the time, Whyte and MacKay weren't concentrating, well, just before we get taken over, Whyte and MacKay weren't concentrating on putting a lot of Tomintoul spirit into first fill bourbon because they didn't know we were being taken over. We would have still been used as a blending whiskey. So it wasn't until August, probably maybe into 2001, that we started to closely look at our cask policy. And as we had always this vision that we were going to be competing and putting in different whiskies into different cask types into our blends. I'll explain a bit what I was doing this morning. But when we're doing this for our blends, we wanted to make sure we have the range of casks to fill the new spirit into. So there's not a lot of first fill bourbon in the 21-year-old. So what you're getting is you're getting slight, you're getting the honey notes, but again, that's coming from the new spirit as well, the sweetness. But you're also getting a bit of the citrus, orangey notes, and on the taste, you're getting a bit of dryness. You will get some of the oakness coming through. Nothing bad about having an oaky note to it. It's been in if you were in prison for 21 years, you would pick up some of your surroundings as well. So the spirit, the whiskey is going to mature, picking up some of its surroundings. Again, I haven't added water to 21 because I know that all of I think one of the comments I saw earlier about the 10-year-old, I think it was you're still getting some of that new spirit coming through. You wouldn't get any of the new spirit coming through in the 21. The cask, basically, does a few things. It adds colour to the whiskey, obviously, but it also, if you have a freshly charred cask of first fill bourbon, you're going to get the vanilla notes coming out, the extracts coming out, but you're also getting a lot of the lactones and the constituents of the wood coming out as well. As you use the cask more often and you're using up those constituents, then you're getting less and less imparting into the whiskey. And it's at that point we send the cask away to get de-char, recharred. And all the cooperage does is they take the exhausted casks, take it back into the cooperage, they remove the heads, they scrape out the inside, just flail with a metal flail, and then they set fire to it again. And it's the depth or the intensity of the fire that depends on how far down into the wood they're going. So then we take it back into the distillery and we fill it as a rechar. And again, what you're doing is you're releasing another part of the wood for the constituents to impart into the whiskey. But also, depending on the level of char, the char acts as a filter. So you're taking any of the sort of strong flavors, they're being filtered out into the wood. So you're getting this filtration effect, but you're also getting the different constituents in the wood imparting its flavor into the whiskey.
I think we've got a question from Rowan here. I don't know if Rowan wants to take himself off mute. No. Maybe not. He's got his hand up as a quick question. That's fine. But yeah, I love this one actually. It was one I've not tasted. I don't think I did the tasting notes for this, and yeah, it's delicious. It's just full of all those flavors that you've just been saying. And we've got Nick saying it's like rich leather, libraries, a slight hint of citrus, really cooling.
Yeah, there is the citrus bit does come through. The citrus comes through to me on the nose rather than the taste. But yeah, there is a citrusy, and again, That's to do with the cask.
Yep.
It's also saying a very short finish though, compared with the others.
Yeah, it doesn't have a long finish. And again, that's why I took it without water. Again, easy drinking, but it's not good that. I always think that the other ones that we mentioned, we tasted earlier, the ones that have got this peppery finish, they tend to a bit dry and stick to the tongue more often. I noticed in today's tasting, we don't have a peated one. Usually it comes at the very end, because what I find if you're tasting the peated whiskies, you don't appreciate the different flavors that you would get from a 21 or the peppery finish from the 10-year-old or whatever. So, well, we don't have a peated one tonight, but yeah, the peated ones they really coat the mouth for quite a while. The 21-year-old doesn't coat the mouth at all. It basically, and I can't. I don't know what the tasting notes are that we produced in our brochure. Bear with me.
Yeah,
I don't even have that in the brochure.
We sort of had a vote, and we said, what would anybody like to drink, the peaty tang or the 30-year-old? I think.
To me,
no.
I mean, I again, as I said earlier, I sit in the fence with a lot of things. Yeah, we make peated whiskies 6 weeks of the year. Peated spirit 6 weeks of the year. We started doing this in 2001, mainly for our blends. So if you can imagine, when I'm making up blends, most of the blends we're making up at that time were for the Indian market. There's a price point to them as well, so they're quite young blends. So what I would do is, other blenders have got different methods of doing it, but if you are wanting a bespoke blend, you would come to the company and I would set out 16 to 20 samples, ranging from grain. Somebody tried to phone me. Okay, we're still there. So ranging from the grain. Now, another thing we do is we fill grain into first fill bourbon, second fill and third fill. And then you've got the aged Tomintouls or Glencadams or any other whiskies we exchange with. We put them together and call them blended malts. Then you come to the peated. Now, the peated can be either a very young 3-year-old or a bit older, maybe an 8-year-old peated. And we use very small amounts for your blends, if that's what they want. We decided, when Mr. Hellman took over the company, let's try and be as independent as we can for our blends. Let's have all the core constituents of the blends in-house. So we have we buy in the grain spirit, grain whiskey. But everything else we can take from our warehouse and make a bespoke blend for the customer. And that was another reason for the peated whiskies, making the peated. So we started off 1 week a year, then it was 2, then it was 4. And Mr. Hellman then found that the peated whiskies could stand in their own right. So we took out the Ballantruan non-age. And then we had the peaty tang, which is the Tomintoul family. But then we found we've got Ballantruan that's in warehouse for 10, 11 years. So we took out the 10-year-old. We've also got Ballantruan in the warehouse for 15 years. So we took out the 15-year-old. So we're always sort of taking out new expressions of the peated whiskies. Personally, not my go-to whiskies. I'll probably get shot down by the people that's listening to this, but they're not my go-to whiskies. Some countries wouldn't thank you for the mildness of a Tomintoul 16 or a 21. They want that robust whiskies. But like everything else, it's what you're doing at the time, what the ambience is. If you're at a barbecue, late evening, you're outside and you're smoking a cigar or whatever, by all means have a Ballantruan or a peaty tang to finish off. But my favourite, I don't have a favourite peaty whiskey because they're not my go-to whiskies. I like my whiskies to be light, mellow, easy drinking. And probably I've just lost half of your audience who prefer peated whiskies to
That's right. Well, we don't have any
what
tonight.
we've got on offer.
We did have somebody saying, though, will Tomintoul release a single cask range if they have some golden casks and some extra stock? I know that you have got a single cask range, but we've not imported it to Australia yet. I think the reason why is we're looking to try and bottle our own single cask range for Australia. So, and instead of bringing it over in like 3 or 4 cases, get the full rate, get 6 casks and get them to Australia and sell them in Australia only. That was my sort of plan with Fergus, was to try and talk to him about having something just for here, and looking at the characteristics that everybody would like here. And obviously, I think here it's definitely more the sherry, the better in Australia. They're very sweet tooth,
Okay.
So it's definitely. But saying that again, the 14-year-old seems to be the favourite so far tonight. So those big robust bourbon bombs, as Ian Forteeth tried to call them.
Yes.
Bourbon bomb was it, and it's good that we're trying to use that now. But yeah, they seem to be popular as well. So it'll be interesting to see if we can try to pick some casks for just here, and release them over here. It'd be really good. Yeah.
And that's one of the problems we have. I don't get involved in the bottling side, but I obviously get involved in new product development. Trying to take out, so for example, say we took out a single cask range of, and it was maybe 300 bottles. If you're putting it into different countries, America, they've got to be put into 75 CLs. South Africa have got to have a B number on the label. I don't know what restrictions there are in Australia, but different countries seem to have different, nothing at all is good. different countries seem to have different rules and regulations about what the font size has got to be. And it must be really difficult for the bottling guys, the NPD guys. But yeah, what you're suggesting, if it was just for one country, then that would be easier rather than just do because at the moment we're doing single cask bottlings, but when we bottle it, we don't know if it's going to France or Scotland or where it's going to.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, because the last one that we've got is this is where I do my own promotional part. 30-year-old.
Yep. Oh.
So this is our 30-year-old. I started in Tomintoul in 1990. My background was Chivas Brothers, but Glenlivet initially, and then Chivas Brothers, they took over Glenlivet in the late 70s, early 80s. And I stayed at Glenlivet. 1983, Chivas Brothers plucked me out of the production side at Glenlivet and asked would I like to join their management training team. I jumped at the chance, so they took me away from Glenlivet and put me down to Benriach, and did the floor maltings at Benriach. And that took me back to my childhood, because when I was a kid growing up, my dad used to take me down to the floor maltings at Glenlivet. And I'm talking when I was 6, 7 years old. It was a play area for me. To everybody else, it was a work area. It was a play area for me. You don't get that nowadays with the health and safety regulations. So I grew up at Glenlivet when they had a maltings there. So going down to Benriach to learn about floor maltings was amazing for me. So I spent a year down there, and then went back up to Glenlivet as brewer and stayed there. And then in 1988, I was seconded to Glenkeith in Strathyla. Glenkeith had a project ongoing that I was looking after for a 8-9 months. And then in 1990, I was getting itchy feet again. I decided that within Chivas, there was 7 brewers that none of the managers were retiring or leaving. So I could have waited there for long enough to get promotion. So this job came up at Tomintoul. And to me, I saw it as a new experience. I've said many times on the production side, I went from the space age to the Stone Age. Chivas, fully automated distilleries, you know, money didn't seem to be an object. Joined Whyte and MacKay, no automation. We've still no automation because that's the way we want to run our distillery. We want people to do things, people to make decisions. So I joined Tomintoul, and what amazed me with going from, I'm not knocking Chivas, but going from the Chivas to Tomintoul. With Tomintoul, you get involved in everything. You get involved in raw materials, you get involved in production, you get involved in warehousing, and then you also get involved in health and safety, environmental, revenue and customs, all the sort of side issues. But you're more wholly involved in everything. And I had 10 good years with Whyte and MacKay at Tomintoul, and then Angus Dundee took over. And the last 20 years has been amazing for me. A lot of freedom. Okay, we've put in a lot of hard work into it, but the family company, I always say to young guys starting out, if you get the chance to join a family company or one of these new start craft distilleries, learn your craft at these places, because the experience you get is second to none. So I started here 30 years ago, well, 31 years ago now, and the company decided they would take out 2 bottlings for me, which was quite an honour. First one was this one. The first edition is it's been an Oloroso cask. I chose the Oloroso casks because of my trips to Spain, and I also chose the fact that I quite like first fill bourbon, so I put quite a bit of first fill bourbon into it as well. Now, bearing in mind, this is in Whyte and MacKay days when this was laid down, there wasn't all that much first fill bourbon available, but what we had available, I wanted to use. So we have 20 years in American oak, American barrel, 10 years in Oloroso sherry cask. So on the nose, you're going to get very much the creamy, the caramel, the toffee, the sultanas, the Christmas pudding. A lot of that flavors will hit you. And surprisingly, what I don't get, and I think it's the 20 years in the bourbon cask, it probably comes through. But because it's another 10 years in the sherry, you don't get that oakiness coming through. That oakiness is not prevalent. And again, smooth, mellow, very easy drinking. So on the palate, this is where the chocolate should come in the palate. Definitely that creaminess, that chocolatey notes coming through. When we're doing the tasted notes for it, if you know Ian Forteeth very well, and I don't know if you met Duncan Baldwin, but when you're doing the tasting notes, we can never agree, and that's why I keep saying to Ian, throw your tasting notes out the window. Forget your tasting notes. But one of the things that came through on if I can just get it here. Maybe it doesn't tell you. Where is it? Yeah, one of the things that came through was there was a fireplace soot. I couldn't pick up that at all. But it went on to the official tasting notes, but I couldn't pick up fireplace soot. Nick Brown, was it garam masala? I have no idea what that taste or nose is like. Somebody help me out here. Ah, right.
you got to go find the flavors in this thing. Like you just have to go deep down in it, and you're just pulling lots of different little bits from it. It's good.
And what the comments, I just saw one comment come up at the bottom, was the different spices. Yeah, you can pick out the spicy notes and the peppery notes on the tongue. I don't know if you one of the comments that I wrote down initially was it was overheated. It was overheated croissants. If you put croissants into the oven and you forget about them, then you open up the oven door and you thought, oh, I've burnt them, but they're not quite burnt, but you open them up and you get that waft coming out of the oven. We've got another one coming out hopefully by end of April, and that's another finish that I've done. It wasn't intentional, but we took in Pedro Jimenez casks from a different bodega called Rey Fernando de Castilla, and we put Tomintoul into these butts, and we finished it in the PX, and that's the one that we're going to bottle for the second of my 30th anniversary bottlings. I was very proud that the company would recognise the 30-year celebration. I became a pensioner about 2 days ago. A week ago.
Wow.
I'm officially a pensioner now. No intention of retiring. No intention of retiring. I'd be totally lost as to what. I've been in the business for 47 years. It would be a shock to the system if I did retire. So no plans at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm pleased that the company recognised my 30 years at Tomintoul. Some might say it's lack of ambition staying in the same place for 30 years, but it's been amazing. It's not just the fact that we've so many different companies, so many different projects to be involved with, and if I was 30 years younger starting out again, the next 30 years is going to be phenomenal. I don't know in the drinks industry, there's lots of, I'm sure you see it as well, there's lots of different trends coming through. The big one up here at the moment is gin. I don't know if that's still, if that's the same in your part of the world.
It is, Robert. We have got, I think we've got more distilleries now in Australia than you do have in the UK. I think we've hit 280 distilleries in Australia for a population of 25 million. And it's
280?
Mostly gin. There's just gin everywhere. People are making it from their home, trying to sell it. It's an abundance in the market, and it'd be interesting to see how long that goes for. But yeah, gin's huge here as well. And I noticed when I was back in Scotland a couple of years back that again, it was huge. It was more regional. You bought a regional gin, so if it was made locally, that's the gin you would buy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the demographics in Australia? Is it the sort of 20 to 30 age group that are buying the whiskies? Or are they buying the gins instead of the whiskies? Or are they still drinking Jim Beam or JD?
Oh, definitely more popular as all those Coke and can items. Like a blend in a can. Is certainly the more predominant in the industry. Younger you are, the more you think you've got to spend more on a whiskey. So it tends to be the younger audience spend more and get dragged into those independent bottlings now more often. And then I guess the older you get, the wiser you get, and you do things like this, and you explore whiskey, and you find the one that suits you, and it's yeah. But I think a lot of people in Australia, they really like to know what they're drinking. They like to know the inside of it and understand a little bit more, and and it's expensive here. It's expensive to drink here. We've got a very, very high duty and excise. I think it's $88 now per litre of alcohol. So we pay, and then we pay 5% on top of that as well. So it's it's quite expensive, and there's a bit of a price war here at the moment, I think, now that whiskey's boomed. So, in which it makes it difficult. A lot of people are buying, importing from Europe. Some are importing direct from distillery. They're trying to avoid the wholesaler so they can win on price. And that's the gist of things over here at the moment.
So when you say the price is high, is that even for your own local produced alcohol as well?
Extremely high for the local stuff, extremely high. So right now, for example, a bottle of 10-year-old Tomintoul would be round about $80, $85, and then what was it, Australian? If you move to something 10 years old in Australia, a 500ml bottle would probably be $150. So you're really doubling it nearly. It's they're starting to come down. They're starting to use Solera systems now, so they can get cheaper production, and they're starting to really look at that. There's a lot of talk, a lot of companies now bringing out blends, so more grain whiskey. But there's an abundance of sherry and port cask whiskey here. It's all port and sherry casks here. They don't have this confidence to lay down bourbon barrels and compete against the Scottish whiskey market. Really, that's the which then means that you can't have a blended whiskey market because there's not enough bourbon barrels or cheaper whiskey to put into blends here. So you're in a good game there. You're doing blends. No competition from Australia.
No, and our blended. I mean, we've got God knows how many countries we export to now, but I mean, you've been up here. My blending plant at Tomintoul. I've got 14 vats up here. I've got 16 down at Glencadam, and I mean, there's blending vats at Coatbridge as well. But at Tomintoul, for example, I've got 14 blending vats. They're not all full. They've all got different products in them because we do different blends for different customers, different countries. But I've got the capacity, if they're all full to the neck, I've got the capacity to store 1 million bulk litres of whiskey just for blending.
Incredible.
At any one time.
Yeah, incredible.
And I mean, this was built, I mean, I only built this in 2003, and that was Mr. Hillman again. That's one thing about the family, and especially Mr. Hillman, and he's now, what, mid to late 80s he is now, but he always said to me that when he took us over, I want maximum production just every year. Well, for the last 21 years, we've been in maximum production. If somebody had said to me in year 2000, Tomintoul is going to be flat out 7 days a week, 24 hours a day for 21 years, I mean, I'd have said he needed to have his brain looked at, because that never happened in this industry. It's a very cyclical production industry. Yep. But everything that Mr. Hillman has, the vision he had in 2000 when he took us over, has come to fruition. He always said to me, I want to do my own blends. I don't want third-party people to do my blends. So we created the blending plants at Tomintoul. Very basic blending plant. I mean, we've got the different vats. We disgorge different whiskies into the vats, and you take a percentage and you mix them together. Okay, you do it at a small scale to make sure you're not going to screw up a big blend. But so you do. You start off a small scale, as I said, but we've got recipes for all the different big blends. So when we're doing a big blend for a customer, I'm not saying it's easy, but you're choosing more casks to put into that blend. When we're doing a limited edition, I'm looking at the Siri, for example, 6,000 bottles. To try and get that consistency each time can be quite difficult. So we on the blending side, the blends that we created, the one that I did, the 8-year-old I did just quite recently, this morning, well, yesterday and today. That's going to be, probably about 90,000 bulk litres of that, which is going to a customer.
Yep.
What they do with it, obviously, they can bottle it in their own country.
Yep.
We can bottle it for them. I know this is not going to be bottled for them, but they're going to do it themselves. We're not allowed to sell single malt Scotch whisky unless it's in bottle. So we have to bottle it in Scotland. But blended whiskies, blended malt whiskies, we can ship out in mainly India. It's mainly blue drums. But anywhere else, it can be tankers, you know, these big tankers that go in the container ships.
I'm pretty
And that's
sure
how they come. That's how they come. That's how we built up a. And I'm not saying we're unique. I'm sure there's a few companies that do the same. It's an hour, but you mean Chivas don't do that, or Diageo, because they're a different they're in a different league to us.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, all the whiskies that we produce, if you compare the single malts with the single malts produced from any of the big boys, hopefully that we can compete with the best.
Yeah. Yeah, they I know that here, I think we've got a blend here called Black Douglas, and I think that comes from you. It's given to Carlton and United Breweries here, and then they put it into bottle here, and then they also put it into Coke cans with you know, whatever. So it's obviously a recipe that they've looked for to do that with, you know. So
don't do what I did when I went one of my first trips to the Far East. The guy with a guy based out in Thailand, and he took me to this store, and I'm looking at the store and I'm looking at all the different blends, and I said, "Chris, who produced?" I can't remember the name of it, but I said, "Who produces this?" And he says, "You do." And I said, "All right." And what it was a blend that we produced, but we didn't know they bottled it in their country. I hadn't a clue what they bottled it as. Our whiskey in their label.
Yeah.
I hadn't a clue, because I mean we do this all the time, and nowadays it's more difficult for not for us, but for the people who we sell to, because they have to be verified by the UK authorities. Right. They pay for that. They pay, I think it's about £250. So if we sell to a company, say in Sri Lanka, and they want to take in a bulk, we've got to know what they're going to do with it, because we don't want them. We've never wanted this, but the UK government now and the Scotch Whisky Association, they could take in a blend of Tomintoul, mix it with their own raw spirit, and sell it as well. They can't sell it as Scotch whisky, but you never know what they're going to do with it. So we have to verify those companies. Yeah. And to get verified, they've got to prove to us what they're going to bottle it as, so that we can say, look, if you're going to bottle it as this, you've got to be aware this is the regulation, and we would stop them, whether it's a label or the text or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, they've all to be verified now. So if you are taking in a batch of say 80 blue drums into Australia of blended whiskey for your own bottling, we would be verifying you, or you would have to be verified, and you pay for the privilege. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, never knew that. It's amazing. Yeah. What I'm going to do just now, Robert, is I'm going to let everybody that's still on, obviously we're quite a bit over time, but what I want everybody to do is, if you want to ask Robert a question, if you can stick your name in the chat, and then we'll go through if you've got a question for Robert. I'm going to save her my 30-year-old. It's been lying in warehouse all the time I've been here. So going back to I know going back to the previous comment of 20, what was you doing 21 years ago? 30 years ago, I was starting here. Well, over 30 years ago now, I was beginning my kids were 10 and 8. Oh. So everything has happened in their life has been everything's happened in their life is in this glass. It's a tremendous achievement, and from everybody here, congratulations on it. And it's I mean, I think that prior to you going to Tomintoul, the amount of distilleries you said that you had been at, etc., I think you had done it all before Tomintoul. I think you had been at a lot of places, and that just shows you, so it was amazing. Yeah. that's the reason that I got employed here. I went straight in as manager of the whole plant, because I wasn't a manager. I was a brewer with Chivas, and when you've been, maybe the wrong, when you've been around the block as long as I had been, and been at Ben Rea, covered Longmorn, been at Glenlivet. I was actually at the feed plant for a few months. Been at Glenkeith, Strathyla. And you're also seconded to Breval, Altabane, for short periods. It wasn't just experience of production. It was experience of people handling. It was experience of health and safety, environmental issues. You had to address all these things. And that wide range of experience obviously was the reason I got the job here. And that's why any young guys or girls that are listening to this and they're wanting a career in the industry, by all means get a qualification, through the Institute of Brewing or a brewing or a distilling qualification, even a basic distilling qualification. By all means get that, but try and get into a distillery that offers you the chance. If you go to the big boys, you'll be in production, but you won't be in warehousing, you won't be in the other divisions. Try and get into a distillery that you can get as much experience as possible, as wide-ranging experience as possible. And I'm lucky. I've been in it for 47 years. So I've got 47 years of experience to call on. But some of the people coming in nowadays don't have that experience, and they don't have the breadth of knowledge that you require to basically run a distillery.
Yeah, because we've got a distillery here called Archie Rose. They're probably now the biggest distillery in Australia. They've got a huge distillery that they've just built, modern day distillery they've just built in Sydney. It has a mill. It has 7 different mills for 7 different barleys that they use, and massive complex. But there's a gentleman called Dave Withers, who's a very young guy, who's the distiller there, and you sometimes think, was he old enough? But he's producing good whiskey. But now you go, well, is there going to be innovation there from him, etc.? And he works very well with the owner. So it's just interesting, and it's interesting to see young people come up and what they do and what they do next. But we don't have a lot of choice here. There's I guess it's small distilleries trying to make them big. So, and then I think some of our oldest distilleries in Melbourne, we've got Bakery Hill, which is just really a 2-man show. But it's one of the oldest. And then you've got Limeburners Distillery over in Western Australia. They've been about for a while, and so, and then obviously the most famous here for us is Sullivan's Cove. I don't know if you've heard of Sullivan's Cove. And then Lark was sort of Bill Lark creating the whole industry.
I met Bill a long time ago.
So he's very, very active in the industry over here, so that's good. But the industry's doing well here. It's coming through. I mean, somebody was saying there, we don't have a lot of access to bourbon barrels. We've got access to wine, but it's the same like India, Taiwan, Japan. Nobody's got access to bourbon barrels within their country. They've all got to go to the US for them, So, we just need to do that more. And there's a nice big ocean between us and the US that they can get it here pretty quickly. We don't need to go through countries and all that sort of thing. It's just a ship to get them here. So, it'd be interesting to see where we go next for that. So it's quite an exciting industry here to sort of see evolve. But I mean, from Christmas sales, Scotch whisky was about 93% Scotch whisky and 7% Australian whisky. So it just shows you there's a long way to go for Australian whisky.
And what about bourbon? I know that in my Whyte and MacKay days, I think Jim Beam was quite to the fore in Australia, but I don't know if the bourbon side is still
Bourbon's
it takes phases.
Yeah, definitely big still bourbon here. Probably more of a resurgence for more expensive bourbons here now. Rum's obviously still big in Australia, so we drink a lot of rum here. But obviously gin's coming up. So I actually don't know where we put all the alcohol, Robert.
Yeah, you've got a big country, just keep building warehouses.
We've got wine as well, so much wine, and we've got an abundance of wine because we're having a problem with China at the moment, and China's saying we don't want your wine, so there's just so much wine here.
I've never, and okay, my son and daughter, they've been to Australia many years ago, but during their student days, I've never been to Australia. My knowledge of Australia is watching Outback Truckers and Sky.
I thought you were going to say Neighbours.
No, I'll leave that to my wife.
Good.
But no, it's yeah. We going back to what we said earlier about the blending side. We a lot of countries, you know, they can only take blends, but the emerging markets is the ones that we need to concentrate on. And the problem that we have is that a lot of the emerging markets, the big boys are usually in before everybody else. And again, we've a long I mean, when I first started with Whyte and MacKay, I can't remember the company we were dealing with in Australia, but the sales at that time were, you know, negligible. And then there were certain markets. Another one that we used to go to was South Africa. Again, many years ago, sales were negligible.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, South Africa had this, I don't know what caused it, but this resurgence, this sort of, they wanted brown spirits. So they were going to mainly Jack Daniels. All of a sudden, Scotch whisky was taking off like nobody's business.
Yeah.
And we always assumed that, you know, countries like Australia, New Zealand, okay, the Far East, depending which country you're in, some can afford the single malt, some can't. But countries that I would call the English-speaking countries, okay, not huge populations, but they've got the capability to buy, you know, good Scotch whiskies. So to me, that was sort of the emerging market. I'm a distiller. I usually, when I'm doing PowerPoint presentations, I start off by saying, I'm a distiller, I make it. Don't ask me about marketing, finance, or sales, because I know nothing about any of these.
Yeah.
Ask me anything about making it, no problem. But the rest of it, I leave to the others within the company to do.
Definitely. Well, I've obviously got your WhatsApp number here, so I'm going to maybe pester you for a few single casks for Australia, and then we'll get on to Fergus and try to see if he can put it all together for us.
Yeah, Brian, we handle all the single casks through Tomintoul. I've got my girl here; she handles all the stock for those in conjunction with Brian and Fergus. So yeah, we're becoming more and more. We've got a lot of single cask in stock. So yeah, you're right. By all means, ping us through an email or a WhatsApp and see what we can do.
Definitely,
And
I think by obviously,
I'll leave it the rest to decide.
Definitely, I think by obviously your palate and your palate with a 30-year-old, you know, whatever you choose is going to be great. So we're not going to argue your decision making on that. But it's gotten late. We're way over time as usual. We've got lots to talk about in the whiskey industry. But
I finished my 30-year-old.
No time for another.
That's right. We've got a full bottle sitting here. I don't know if we'll open it or not.
I'll go through to my office now, and they'll probably be having coffee for the coffee time. 11's is so. But yeah, very enjoyable. But I was going to say, any of the people that were on, as I say, I was able to see them when I was on my laptop. I couldn't see anyone when I went onto my phone. But if they want to send me an email or whatever, any questions they have to do with production, so I don't do finance or sales, but anything to do with production, if there's any questions that they've always wanted to know but too frightened to ask, then ping me an email and we will always reply.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll try to get those details to everybody. But thank you again. Congratulations, and thanks to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Our next tasting here will be on the 29th of April. It will be a New Zealand and Australian one for Anzac Day, and we'll be doing three whiskies from each distillery, so it'll be quite interesting. And but again, thanks to Robert and spending that time, and I hope you have a good day. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you very much. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And you're welcome to come visit Domindell anytime the restrictions allow.
Look forward to it soon.
Or a bus.
Okay then. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was great. I should have put up the photo.